First question I saw: how to prepare for jobs slash industry as a new grad. Like many of you, I am currently looking for a job in the CS industry. It's tough right now, I know, but that's all not what I'm concerned about. I'm a recent grad about 5 months ago, and I'm still having trouble finding a career. Not only that, I also feel incredibly unprepared for said career. Most jobs seem like I like they re- seem most jobs seem like I like they require a deep understanding about their tech stacks, algorithms in order to land a job. I wasn't slacker at all in school, 3.5 GPA, but also wasn't the smartest kid in class. My last year of university, I worked in an internship with a few other students for a small company making a. I think this question applies to a lot of the new grads right now. The industry is extremely competitive. It is extremely sparse for new grad jobs, and most developers right now working at tech companies joined in the year 2000, 2001. Of course, there's more senior people, but they joined when times were better. So this advice is a lot harder to give. I myself graduated in 2000, and it was a lot easier. So I did not experience what you experienced, though I did. The company I worked for in 2022, um, you know, I was you experienced something similar. So I kind of can relate. But there are a few things, you can do as a new grad. First of all, do not blame yourself. Right now, it's a tough time, and I can see where he says his mental health has been deteriorating. You know, that you're putting too much stress on yourself on a thing you cannot control. You cannot control the state of this economy. You can't control any of that. So don't blame yourselves. That's the first step. Second of all, I think you need to build apps and deploy them. The thing is, and I don't really mean video games. I know a lot of us get into software engineering to build games. However, that area of work is probably the hardest, the worst paid, and not as needed in general companies. Most companies are not going to build games. However, they're going to build applications in web. They're going to build desktop. They're going to build a lot of things that do not, don't as easily translate from video games. Of course, video games are probably one of the hardest things to build, and you'll learn quite a bit. However, if you're looking for just pure employment, I need a job. Do not just straight build video games. Go for applications and then try to deploy them. Try to learn, deployment pipelines. Learn Terraform, spinning up cloud infrastructure, deploying your application, and go through the hardships of doing that. Trying to acquire some users just to test, not to build out this full-fledged application that thousands of users are going to use. You're here to experience what it's like to build an app and deploy it like from 0 to 100 fully. That's the first step. First tip I can give. Second tip is do not use AI code generation. I know that sounds crazy, but you are new. You have to learn the basics. You have to learn the fundamentals. So do not use AI for the basics right now. You're not going to be allowed to use AI to interview, so why use it to build your stuff right now? On the job site, yes, you will. You'll use AI. Companies have their own internal AI applications, but that's only when you get the job. You should not be using it as a crutch for your current application process, because as an interviewer, I will look at an applicant, and if I feel like, hey, they're not doing a great job, they don't really have an understanding of the fundamentals, I'm more likely to pass them up. So do not use AI as a crutch. And I think the current devs that are studying it's a huge crutch that's coming to play, and I've seen it harm a lot of developers where they rely too much on AI and too much on code generation, thinking, hey, this is the correct answer, and when changes are needed to be made, which like always. You're gonna have to adjust applications, and you're gonna be working with legacy code. They're stuck because AI currently is not great for it. I know there's some advancement with that, but it's not great. Um, so you need to know the fundamentals. Do not use it as a crutch. Third, and I think what he's doing is correct, is study leak code. Sadly, since it's so competitive, you have to study. I think he has to do more than an hour a day, but that's hard. I think an hour a day is honestly kind of fine because it is draining. I wish I did it more. I did not do that enough, and he is on the correct path of trying to study on all those algorithms, just trying to pass that interview, that initial interview of coding assignments. That is a high priority for you because otherwise you can't show your skills no matter how great of a side project you have, how great anything is. If you can't pass the initial code test, code screening, you can't, go and talk to an actual person and convince them, hey, I'm a great new grad. Um, and then I think a question to answer the second part of the question, how to prepare for the industry, you can't. That's the sad fact. What you should be focusing on isn't the industry itself. You should be focusing on passing those first few interviews. And let me explain why. The industry is so varied from team to team, from company to company, that you cannot prepare specifically for roles. You can learn tech stacks, obviously. You can learn, a bunch of frameworks. However, one company might use this framework. One might use React. One might use Angular. One might use Vue. One might use HTMX, right? But that's not you can't just learn every single one and especially as a new grad and think, hey, I'm covered. I'm going to get this job. That's a huge waste of time. You should be learning just the fundamentals of your computer science competencies, of your software engineering competencies, and that will translate to every single other framework. If you understand the core fundamentals of software development, of computer science, you are going to do great with a bunch of frameworks. You cannot just prepare for a specific job because that's impossible. That is impossible. I know in the post it talks about how there are a ton of requirements for jobs where they say you have to know this framework, you have to know this tech stack. However, I think those job applications, A, are flawed and probably are set up by someone not in engineering, and B, are impossible, just due to the fact that preparing for a single job will get you nowhere, and it might make you a worse candidate. To be quite frank, you should focus on getting your core fundamentals down. You cannot just prepare for the industry because it is too broad to prepare for. And I think there's one exception, though. One exception, and this is my final tip here if you're trying to prepare for the industry, and that is learn to debug and find where problems are coming from. Learn to, besides, the advice I've given of, hey, you got to get your core computer science principles down. Learn how to debug. Learn, hey, what does this piece of code do, and what does this piece of code do, and when something goes wrong, what happens? This one is tough. This one's hard to prepare for unless you go back to the other point of build your own project, see what works, see what doesn't, see where errors are thrown. That's what you should be learning, and I think that is why AI isn't great either. You don't get that experience of knowing, hey, something's going on. Where is this going wrong? Right? If you use AI, it will complete it for you. Maybe it might throw bugs, but you're then gonna use AI to solve those bugs, and you get no practical application with maybe messy code in between. So those are my tips. It's a tough industry. Really, just don't beat yourself up. It's very hard to prepare for. Try to take some tips, build applications that are maybe not video games. Leak code is great. I think get your foot in the door and try to deploy an app that you think is interesting. It won't solve any world problems. In reality, none of our ideas really do. But at least try to go through that full process, and you'll learn quite a bit. And I think this person is already taking steps, and everyone watching this video is taking steps ahead of most other software engineer new grads. So. this next question is a doozy. It's a doozy. Um, it shows and encompasses how much of an ego that some of us have as software engineers, and I am not say I'm any better. I'm not better. But this question is beyond what beyond ego. The question is it harder to be a software engineer or a doctor? Insane question already. I know what most of you, and we all know the answer to this one, but it is insane. Let's hear them out though. Open mind. Let's keep an open mind here. Let's read what the prompt says. With software being incredibly competitive, there's a ton of people applying to over 500 jobs and not getting a single response back. Not to mention learning a ton of skills, having to apply them in the real world. It's not something you can just study and get good at nowadays. It takes some level of innate skill and intelligence. What do you guys think? That is, this question might be a bait, but that is insanely egotistical. First off, no. Software engineering is not harder than being a doctor. Not even close. It is not easier to be a entry-level dev versus, a med student. That's probably the equivalent, or a resident, which I think resident is at a software senior level at that point. So I think this stems from software engineers not realizing how difficult other fields are. Sometimes we feel like everything revolves around us, and I think that's human nature in general. We feel like our jobs are the most important jobs and everything revolves around us, but no, that is not true. The medical field is insanely competitive. I would say it's even more competitive to become a doctor than a software engineer. First off, you have to go through undergrad. 4 years, have to be top of your class at all 4 years. Not true for software engineers. Most software engineers do not put their GPA on their resumes, just in case. You're not even required to, but if you're trying to get into medical school, you have to be at the top of your class, first of all. Second, applying for any form of med school is impossible. The acceptance rates are single digits for all med schools. Every single one is about a single digit to maybe low double digits to get in the first place. Third, when you're in med school, it's not over. You have step 1, step 2 exams. Those are no longer, the step 1 exam is no longer pass-fail, is no longer graded. Actually, it's pass-fail. So now, when you're in undergrad or in med school, you have to pretty much do research at all times. You have to pump out papers like crazy to just stay ahead if you want to get into a competitive residency for a program you want to do. That's already 10 times, 20 times harder than doing anything software engineer related. And you're competing against brilliant people. Some of the smartest people in the world are trying to become doctors, and you have to compete against every single one of them to get into a residency. You've already weeded out the, potentially not as bright candidates with undergrad. But now you're trying to weed out brilliant people out of residency into a top residency in med school. So you're forced to do a bunch of papers, and then once you become a resident, you get paid $50,000-$60,000, right? For working 80 hours a week, 80 plus sometimes. I know a resident who only had Sundays off. That is insane levels of work, dedication, and intelligence. It does not even, because software engineers do not come close. The barriers to entry are so much higher for doctors. It's not even close. That doesn't even bring up the Anki cards. When do software engineers persistently review their tech stacks, their languages, their brush up? The residents, doctors still do the Anki cards, and I know so the software engineer audience does not know what an Anki card is, and that just goes to show how much harder it is to become a doctor. So this question is probably a joke question, but it is not even close. I will talk about. Let me give some defense to software engineers right now, and maybe like bash in our field. We currently, our barrier to entry is the interview process to get into a job, right? That is how we determine who a good engineer is or potentially can be. However, there are so many jobs you can do. People from government positions to contractors. There's a plethora versus how many med schools there are. Not even close. You can become a software engineer self-taught. You cannot become a self-taught doctor for good reasons. For good reasons, you cannot become a self-taught doctor, but you can become a self-taught software engineer. There are bootcamp grads who became software engineers right now in the field. There is not a doctor bootcamp, besides maybe the Caribbean schools, which already very shady. That is probably the bootcamp equivalent for doctors. So, but we don't talk about those. Those are if you're getting a Caribbean doctor, you might want to avoid that one. But those barriers are already so much more stringent for doctors, and these people are brilliant. They are very smart individuals. They are. I'm going to say maybe smarter than an average doctor is most likely smarter than an average software engineer. We have to let our egos go for a little bit and realize that. Software engineering is not easy. It is a demanding job. You have on call, but so do doctors. And I think asking a question like this is already disingenuous. I will say this question was very much disliked. And for good reasons. I think we have to sometimes let our egos go as software engineers. We are not the center of the world. In summary, being a doctor is way harder than software engineering. It's harder to get into being a doctor. It's harder to become a doctor. It's harder to stay a doctor, and it's harder just doing the day-to-day job. There is no remote for doctors usually. Maybe there's a few, but you're not going to be you're not going in thinking you'll get a remote job as a doctor. You're going to be taking care of patients. You're going to be in constant stress and duress. And there's a reason we have such negative statistics for doctors too. So very egotistical question, but I thought it was a fun one too. The final question is, how useful are certificates if I have no other qualifications? Hello everyone, this is my first time posting here, but I'll get to the point. I am a high school graduate with no skills, no qualifications, nor qualifications, and going to college or university isn't an option for me at the moment. So I want to know, how useful are certificates? Like the ones from Coursera, Udemy, and specifically Google IT certification. I appreciate any thoughts, any advice or thoughts. So I actually think this is a very good question. And the reason for that is a lot of people wonder about certificates, if there are useful ones, if it could get you a job, and they are valid questions because certifications vary, and I usually see an answer where it's just like a cutthroat, hey, no, certificates are useless, do not get them, they are a waste of time. But just as everything, this is a nuanced answer, and I honestly have a different opinion. I think there's two, answers. There's two questions to be drawn from this. One is, are certificates useful if you have no previous experience or education? And two, are certificates useful if you are already experienced and you're trying to elevate your skills, right? Trying to get a new role. So to answer the direct question of when you have no prior experience, I agree with the consensus that no, they are not very useful. I think especially from Coursera, Udemy, and Google IT. Those will not really help advance you, especially because sadly there is somewhat of a stigma, less so in computer science, but it is growing now, that you need a degree and that you should have a bachelor's in computer science or at least some form of degree before getting a job, especially in this economy. It's much tougher. Even new grads are struggling, so having no experience is going to be tough. However, that doesn't mean there is no option for this individual. I think other people have pointed out the best option is going through community college at first, getting the associates, then going to college. I am a proponent of college when it makes sense, and going at it slowly. I recommend going to a computer school where you can drive to. B, staying close in your state, um, trying to get as many scholarships. One, go to the library. There are scholarships there, or they can point you resources to scholarships. Um, Two, look online for some scholarships. See if, and then three, look at local papers. Most unclaimed scholarships are from local papers or anything you have in your area. So that's how to make school affordable for anyone trying to get into computer science. Try to do that. You should not go out of state if you cannot afford it. It is very expensive, and I feel like most degree programs, well, there are degree programs in your state that will help you get those jobs, and I think you can self study and become a great engineer. So hopefully that helps this individual. Um, the second question was, are certificates just flat out useless? No, no. I think one, the cybersecurity field, the certificates are part of the job. They are some. I'm not a cybersecurity expert. I just know individuals studying it, and they are once they're done with their courses, they're getting their certificates. It shows this level of um, understanding, and it's a requirement for that area for jobs, for companies, for cybersecurity in general. So those certificates are excellent. Secondly, AWS certs. I don't know if there's some controversy to it, but I think those are extremely useful. I think those are good to have. I think if someone is able to get an advanced cert or just AWS like specialty cert, they understand that area very well. They understand when to set up like complex things in AWS, and I think AWS is a great skill to have. So those certifications, I think, are a plus on your resume. I think Coursera, Udemy usually are ignored, and I agree. I think those do avoid those, but I think stuff from Google, from AWS, that are cloud based elevate you and your career trajectory. I think they can be a tipping point at like some companies to get a promotion, to become a senior engineer, to get on the next level, just get better in the field itself. So I think I'm a huge proponent of those, especially for when you're trying to learn cloud. I think that's a good idea. Those have much more rigorous standards than Coursera and Udemy. Those were all the questions I had. I know I probably redefined some career paths, some career trajectory with my very warranted opinion. Definitely had great insights that no one else could have ever given, especially the doctor one. But thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, you're welcome. That's all I got to say. You don't even have to like or subscribe. Just, you're welcome.